Bizarre Brain Comics. Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I am Gary, your host. This is where I like to take a look at some older comics, talk a little bit about the characters and creators, and examine the stories and the art. This time, I'm not going to look so much at a comic book, but a book about some comics. This is from 1981. It's a Fantagraphics book. The ElfQuest Gatherum. It's just a book about Wendy and Richard Pini and their creation, ElfQuest, and development and stuff like that. And here on the cover, drawn by Wendy Pini, and this is Wendy, and this is her husband Richard. And together they created and self-published, started their own publishing company, and self-published their book of ElfQuest. And speaking of self-publishing, here's my book, Bizarre Brain Comics Anthology, available on Amazon, $7.99, and I'm very close to getting my next volume of comic stories out there. I've done this is my cover design for my next volume, which we hope to have available in just a few weeks. So, yeah, Wendy and Richard Pini. Well, as I said, this is the ElfQuest Gatherum. I don't know what a Gatherum, or guess Gatherum. Never heard of it the word before or since. So, but it's from 1981. It's Fantagraphics. Now, and it's of course about Wendy Pini, née Fletcher, born in 1951, and her husband Richard Pini, born in 1950. They are a married couple and creative team responsible for the ElfQuest series of comics and graphic novels, as well as prose productions, and they're founders of Warp Graphics Publishing. Now, I've covered an ElfQuest book before, but this is more about them and this particular book. Wendy was born in San Francisco, and her early interest in fantasy was spurred by love of Shakespeare and Kipling, and she drew artistic inspiration from Arthur Rackham and Edmund Dulac from the Victorian era, as well as comics from Disney, Doug Wildey, Jack Kirby, and Japanese manga. And Richard was born in New Haven, Connecticut. He went to MIT. This is a surprise. Went to MIT and working toward an astrophysics degree. Yes. And meanwhile, he got sucked into a love of comic books. It's hard to believe he's an astrophysicist. And Wendy and Richard. Richard read a letter written by Wendy, which was published in an issue of the Silver Surfer comic. And at that time, they often printed the name and address of the writers. That's how a lot of the fandom started. The fans started corresponding with one another. Okay, and they started corresponding and were married 4 years later. Wendy worked on a career in illustration, and Richard worked on as a lecturer at the Charles Hayden Planetarium in Boston, and later was a high school teacher. Galaxy Science Fiction and Galileo magazines sported several covers painted by Wendy in the 70s. Plus, she made a cosplay splash at comic and science fiction conventions dressed as Red Sonja. And that takes a lot of confidence in one's figure to go about in public as a costume, dressed as Red Sonja. And if you Google Wendy Pini, one of the first things that comes up are some of the pictures of her as Red Sonja from the 70s. And she is just a beautiful, beautiful young lady. And she had the figure to pull it off. And hell, even though she's older, she may still have the figure to pull it off. In 1978, they began publishing ElfQuest comics as co-writers and publishers. In 2007, Wendy produced a futuristic version of Edgar Allan Poe's Mask of the Red Death, and she did some Beauty and the Beast based on the TV show. And that Mask of the Red Death she did as a graphic novel and a webcomic. But this is unusual. So after 40 years, the quest of the elves finally came to an end. Woo! I dropped my pointer. Yes. And it was apparently a planned end. Now, they made a pretty quick splash in comics at the time that they started publication, and gained some popularity, but which grew in the 80s for a time. Marvel began reprinting their earliest issues, which is what I covered before, which was a Marvel epic reprint of issue number 1, ElfQuest number 1. And but in the 90s, their publishing really expanded. They started publishing stuff beyond ElfQuest, but even with ElfQuest, they had. See, I'll show that here. They had several titles, ElfQuest titles. Here's like Blood of 10 Chiefs, and here you can see some more. They had Hidden Years, Blood of 10 Chiefs, New Blood, and Wave Dancers. And Wave Dancers, if I remember correctly, was about they were elves who were mermaids. And they had put them in different time periods. Some was the original ElfQuest period. Different creators. They didn't do it all themselves. Had different writers and artists. They still had their editorial hands in there. And they produced. Also had one title. I can't remember the title. It wasn't shown there. That was science fiction. Elves in space, basically. Sometime in the far future of the world of two moons, which is the world where that ElfQuest takes place on, and some of the elves were mostly humans in spacey stuff. They had some stories that were set in a medieval period, and then the main ElfQuest storyline was basically prehistoric for the humans, but they had the elves and trolls, etc. I'm going to take a look here, and this book is an interesting book. You can see this back cover, and because it's got articles, interviews, introductions here, shows a lot of art and early art. And one thing I want to show you is that they were almost as a comic strip in the newspapers. And remember, this book is from 81, and they only started in 78. So at this point, there's only had 3 years of public ElfQuest publication, and but they were apparently approached by a syndicate to adapt it as a comic strip, and so here are some of the stuff that they worked up on, but they decided not to go that route just because it was too much work to do that and their regular title. And you can see some pages here. So early on, before they actually published, Wendy, I guess, had done several pages, and to see how it would go before they ever published. And here's two different versions of the same page. You can see how the page layout and dialogue has changed. Same thing here. And some of the pages of character designs. We got here the world of the Wolf Riders. They even had a thing when they were parodied by Fred Hembeck, and then they got back because he accidentally put too many fingers on them and stuff like that. And it's a very interesting little book, and as I said, 81, so it's over 40 years old. I don't know, I've never looked. I think this is the only copy I've ever seen, and so I think it's probably fairly rare, and no telling what it might be, what the value of it might be now. So, the art of ElfQuest. ElfQuest here, there, and everywhere, and it shows that some of the stuff, different languages, as ElfQuest was reprinted all over the world, and this is only 3 years after they started. Here's a nice pencil drawing that she did, and some various other things, because they had stories from various time periods of the lives of the main characters. And they were also approached by a small animation company to do an animated film of the Wolf Riders of ElfQuest, and she worked up some stuff here, some for artist reference, turnarounds and model sheets and the like, you know, and how some of the other people drew them, but that never came about. The funny thing was that the Ralph Bakshi movie, Wizards, the elves looked a great deal like the ElfQuest elves, because they were drawing a lot of that. And there you can see the couple themselves. And it's really an interesting book, and for some history and background on the origin of ElfQuest. And that's all I was really going to show you. I did want to show you some of the other artwork from here. Some nice stuff this is from 1994. Different artists, but you can see some nice artwork, nice coloring, and good quality printing that they did. And I don't know, it was only just a few years that they did that. And I haven't seen any, of course, it's been a few years since they've done any, but I haven't seen any more recent stuff in probably 20 years of ElfQuest, so I don't even know how it ended. But that's all I've got for you this time. Just wanted to share this, the ElfQuest Gatherum, featuring Wendy and Richard Pini and ElfQuest. And thank you so much for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe. Are you an ElfQuest fan? Have you ever read any? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Did you read any of these other titles, and what did you think of those? Any of the novels or the other paperbacks that were edited by Richard Pini, but with short stories by other authors set in the ElfQuest world? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And that's all I've got. And remember, comics are art.